The first and most oppressive lie ever uttered was the song of freedom.
Welcome to Screen Crush, I'm Ryan Airy. Loki is exploring the concept of free will. Is it real or an illusion? This debate between free will and determinism has been going on for centuries, and now it continues on in the Marvel Cinematic Universe.
Why'd you catch that? Because it was gonna fall, but it didn't fall. You caught it. The fact that you prevented it from happening doesn't change the fact that it was going to happen.
Simply stated, determinism means that everything we do is a result of a predetermined outcome. In other words, our history has already been written. According to the TVA, free will plays a tiny role in the predetermined sacred timeline, and there can't be any deviation from the grand plan of the timekeepers. But variants like Loki prove that there are aberrations in this plan, and the so-called sacred timeline isn't exactly set in stone after all.
The future is not set. There is no fate but what we make for ourselves.
So far, the MCU's Disney Plus shows have been dealing with pretty complex themes. WandaVision explored trauma, depression, and grief. Falcon and the Winter Soldier dove deep into racial and socio-political topics. And Loki continues this trend by raising philosophical questions about free will.
You've always lived within your set path.
I live within whatever path I choose.
The question, are we truly free, is embedded in our DNA. Whatever the answer is, defines who we are. Do we have agency in our actions? Are any of our choices really our own? Are we in control of our fate? Or is it all part of some predetermined chain of events?
I have no choice. Everything is preordained.
Is free will just an illusion that we create with our limited perception?
And don't worry about the vase.
Or are our actions simply dictated by cause and effect, stimulus and response?
Would you still have broken it if I hadn't said anything?
And if so, aren't our choices meaningless in the grand scale of a preordained destiny?
Oh, this is absurd.
This is the exact existential crisis that Loki is dealing with. The TVA are preaching that there is only one timeline created by the timekeepers to save reality from chaos. This sacred timeline has no wiggle room. Events will play out as they were intended to.
Causality. Action, reaction.
Everything begins with choice.
No, wrong. Choice is an illusion created between those with power and those without.
It's all part of a grand plan of the timekeepers. Now, if this is true, all the events we have seen in the MCU so far are part of this preordained timeline. Even the Avengers going back in time to collect the Infinity Stones. It was all supposed to happen, as Ravonna Renslayer explained.
What they did was supposed to happen. You escaping was not.
The TVA are there to enforce the sacred timeline, make sure that there are no deviations. So, case closed, right? There's no free will.
So everything is written. Past, present, future. There's no such thing as free will.
Well, I mean, it's an oversimplification.
Well, it's not that simple. The very existence of variants, such as Loki, proves otherwise. Variants can escape their predetermined fate. They are the remainder in the Matrix, free from the Timekeeper's control. But this is a terrible violation against the sacred timeline. According to the Timekeepers, variants are cosmic mistakes that create nexus events that might lead to another multiversal war.
Ooh.
All of this means that the Timekeepers don't allow free will, meaning that this show doesn't just address free will versus determinism, it's actually the main conflict of the story. So, in Loki's case, he's a time criminal because he picked up the Tesseract. He wasn't supposed to do that. He was meant to be taken back to Asgard, jail, accidentally kill his mom, replace Odin, Ragnarok, Windpipe Crush, end of reel. But this Loki didn't follow along that particular yellow brick road. He picked up the Tesseract and escaped determinism. He used his free will. He branched off. Isn't that proof that free will is possible in the MCU?
You and I, here at the TVA, we're the only ones who are actually free.
So in a way, you can look at the sacred timeline as the Matrix. The TVA are the agents. The Timekeepers are the machines. All the humans stuck in their predetermined paths are like the humans that are imprisoned inside the simulation. So I guess that means that Loki is Neo.
He's the one. What?
The irony here is that Loki, as always, is a contradiction of himself. In the first episode, he spoke about the fact that freedom is a lie.
For nearly every living thing, choice breeds shame and uncertainty and regret. There's a fork in every road, yet the wrong path always taken.
So Loki is talking about predetermination here. Free will is an illusion created by people who simply can't understand the fundamental laws of the universe, and those laws are determinism. This ties into what Loki said back in 2012's Avengers.
The bright lure of freedom diminishes your life's joy in a mad scramble for power, for identity.
Preaching that it would be simpler for humans to just let him rule over them. It's all ironic now because he was able to escape his fate and serve as proof that free will exists. The real question is, what will Loki do with his ability to choose? Will he change or remain the same old Loki? See, variants are free from determinism. As soon as they strayed off the Timekeeper's path, they make their own fates, like Merida.
If you had the chance to change your fate, would you?
Loki can do whatever he wants. His future is in the air, and even the Timekeepers don't know where his path will lead. He is an anomaly, or I guess the TVA would call him by another name.
A cosmic mistake.
First, that's a terrible thing to say to anyone. Second, let's talk about the moment that Loki committed his terrible crime. In his defense, Loki blamed the Avengers for messing up the timeline.
You see, I only came into possession of the Tesseract because they traveled through time.
Which is sort of true, but Ravonna Renslayer's rebuttal is that the Avengers were supposed to do all of that, so it was fine. Again, determinism. So what was supposed to happen here? Because once you really think about it, if Loki didn't use the Tesseract, then things would have played out very differently in Endgame. The only reason why Steve Rogers and Tony Stark had to travel back to the 1970s was to steal the Space Stone. So if Loki doesn't escape with the stone, the time heist in 2012 would have been successful. Were the Avengers meant to retrieve the Space Stone from 2012, or were they always meant to go back to the 70s no matter what? If it's the latter, then Loki isn't actually guilty of any timeline crime.
Yeah, wow.
Not to mention that the trip back to the 70s helped Steve decide that he wanted to be with Peggy. So does this mean that he wasn't supposed to stay behind in the 40s? If so, then maybe this really is Peggy Carter getting arrested in the background of Episode 1. All of this means that events aren't really set in stone, and the Timekeepers constantly adjust to these changes based on what they decide should happen. And then there's Lady Loki. She was able to create many Nexus events, kill multiple Minutemen, steal reset charges, and most importantly, escape the Timekeepers' control. While most of these things are terrible crimes, Randy is once again proof that free will is possible. She chose to do all of these things, and choice is the name of the game here.
Why, Mr. Anderson? Why? Why do you persist?
Because I choose to.
This is why Lady Loki is so powerful and why she's such a threat to the Timekeepers. She's their worst nightmare, a variant who not only exists outside of her path, but also someone who has the agency to fight back. And so, maybe determinism isn't as unconditional as the TVA makes it out to be.
I am on the verge of acquiring everything I am owed, and when I do, it'll be because I did it, not because it was supposed to happen.
But maybe Miss Minutes secretly has the answer. Think about this. Miss Minutes is programmed a certain way, the same way people are hardwired to like food and Betty White. But within our programming, we choose how to respond to our individual environments, just like Miss Minutes can choose how to respond to Loki's questions.
Can you hear me? Are you recording or are you alive?
Sort of both.
And so, the so-called sacred timeline isn't so sacred after all. I mean, who gave the Timekeepers their power and authority to decide what's supposed to happen? Because look, I'm not buying the TVA propaganda, no matter how cute Miss Minutes' voice is. And come to think of it, the TVA sort of feels like a bunch of religious zealots, especially when they talk about the sacred timeline and the Timekeepers. I mean, just listen to Mobius and how he describes his faith in the Timekeepers.
No more Nexus events, just order, and we meet in peace at the end of time.
That sure sounds like brainwashing to me. This is another case of a free will debate. Propaganda, manipulation, and programming are all associated with a form of control over human perceptions. For example, if the Timekeepers drilled it into the heads of the TVA that they must protect the sacred timeline at all costs, this results in variants being considered criminals, cosmic mistakes that must be erased.
Doubt will plunge this country back into chaos, and I will not let that happen.
One of the first goals of a totalitarian state is to dehumanize the other, to make their own population feel like they're superior to their enemies, and that they must rely on their leaders to protect them from outsiders at all costs. Though maybe Mobius doesn't truly believe in all this propaganda. His dream to one day ride a jet ski sounds like a longing to break free of the TVA's strict rules.
I think a TVA agent showing up on a jet ski on the sacred timeline, that would create a branch for sure.
It'll be fun, though.
Yeah. It'd be really fun.
And you can say the same thing about the head of the TVA, Ravonna Renslayer. The fact that she collects trophies from different points in time says a lot about the nature of the time variance authority. Freedom is embedded within any human being, no matter what 3 space lizards say.
The price of freedom is high, and it's a price I'm willing to pay.
Determinism might be the cosmic law, but people will always try to break free. This might be the reason why the Timekeepers are so worried about variance. Maybe the whole multiversal war is all propaganda, and the space lizards are simply terrified they will lose their power if people realize that they can veer off their paths without consequences.
What's happened's happened. Which is an expression of faith in the mechanics of the world. It's not an excuse to do nothing.
After these 2 episodes of Loki, the debate of free will versus determinism seems to be the driving point of the show. The next 4 episodes are likely to make things more complicated, but so far, it seems like free will prevail in the end. Anyways, that's our take on the main theme of Loki. Do you think free will is possible in the MCU, or is everything preordained? Let me know in the comments below or at me on Twitter. And if it's your first time here, please subscribe. For Screen Crush, I'm Ryan Airy.